If we dive into our geometry, let's Alt-N, let's add a null here. Let's turn on the display and render of our null and turn off of our torus. So what we're up to, right? The idea that we might want to explore, might want to get to, is I want my point color to actually be my point normal. And in fact, I can do this with the point SOP. So my point SOP, what I want here is in color, is I want to add a color. And instead of me input color, I want my input texture, my texture coordinates. Oh, bother, texture 0. And 1. So UV. I'm going to turn off that other channel. And now I can actually see the UVs that actually are on this torus. Now this is a little bit, right, this like a strange kind of setup for how my UVs sit here. So back over here, we could add a texture. SOP. All right. So now we can see our UVs are spread out on this just a slightly different way. You know, we could use this opportunity to look at, say, something like upper rectangular. Instead, this like schmutzes or smashes, excuse me, some of our points at our poles. That might not actually be super great for what we're looking for. We could use our XYZ position. This is similarly going to do like it's not totally what I want. I'm actually pretty happy with the orthographic projection of our UVs here. The one thing I'm going to do is I'm actually, in this case, I'm going to turn up 4080 the divisions, because I've got a slightly smoother looking piece of geometry here. Okay, if we back out, we now have a gorgeous torus that is instead its UVs. So let's add a constant material. We're gonna play with a few different ideas here. So we got a constant material, Alt-N, right, as a null. We can put that right on here. This will give us a nice bright, perfectly emissive look at our UVs. And now our displacement is looking way more better. That is much closer to the kind of displacement that I'm expecting it to look like, right? The other piece that we probably want to do here, and we might not be able to actually do this with our render pass, but we can definitely do it up here with our render, is we can turn our anti-aliasing off. So we'll get some other jaggies that'll come out over here. That's all right. While we're at it, let's make sure that we turn this up to like 32-bit. That'll give us a little more bit depth. Give us a little slightly better chunk of performance here. Okay, great. Look at that. So it's hard to see what's totally happening there. But what we might do is we might go ahead, in this case, use a threshold top. Now previously, the technique that Carlos used was to actually go ahead and render out just that mask. But our threshold, rather than luminance, we could actually instead use alpha as our determining characteristic for how we actually threshold something. And because we don't have any other things with alpha in here, we're kind of rendering this completely without any transparency. This is a really great kind of trick to do just that. Now, if we add a composite, which is by default set to multiply, we can take our displaced image and our other image, and now we've masked out all those other bits. Swell, love it. Let's go ahead and do another, while we're at it, let's do an under top, right? Our first input is going to be our scene proper. And then we're going to have our other displaced object. Woo, look at that. All right. And then last but not least, at this point, we can do our anti-aliasing. And this should smooth out those jaggies here finally at the end stage of this process. And now we might go back to our displace, left the parameters open there, and now we can start to really play with how are we displacing this thing, right? What's our offset, right? We've got a little bit more, or excuse me, our offset down here. We can start to play with how this is going to impact, whoa, where we're actually pulling that texture from. Right, we've got one set of handles here that we could think about. And this displace weight is going to give us another set of parameters for how much this is being pulled up and to the right. And in this case, we're looking at red and blue, but let's actually look at red and green, right? Because that's really what we've got over here is we've got red and green that are on this. And now we're looking even better. We've got an even more kind of compelling set of displacement that's happening. 0.1, 0, 1, there we go. Oof, really. It doesn't take much to give you what you're looking for here in this kind of refraction quality. Now this will look even better if we say take our geometry here and we animate it. Oops. Frame. Ooh. Great. All right. Not bad. And we can push this a little bit more, right? I think another way that we can kind of play with this, after our composite over here, let's scoot all this over. Let's add a transform. Our transform, let's go ahead and translate this over just the smidgiest of smidges. And rather than doing everything, let's look at a channel mask. So if we said did only our red and green channels, right, we've got a little bit of kind of chromatic aberration. Whoa, that's like a little too much chromatic aberration. And maybe we don't want to do that. Oh, yeah, ooh, look at that. And after anti-alias, okay. We could play with, do we want both these channels? Do we want red, green, and blue? This gives us a nice like little highlight halo. We could also use the kind of edge technique would be another way to look at this. And let's finally end all this in a null. So there we go. That's pretty passable. We probably turn up, it's pretty good there. We still have a little bit of jaggies in this, which I'm not super psyched about. But if we wanted to, we could move around that bit this way. Rather than a render pass, we do another render top. And this time, this render top is going to go ahead and only be our geometry. Great. And this render, let's go ahead and turn it back to being 4x anti-alias. This one will turn down to off. So we'll just isolate only this part. The other mechanism that we want to make sure we handle here is let's make sure we turn up the bit depth. It'll give us a little bit more data. Don't necessarily need that up with our regular render. We can put that back to 8 if we're really worried about our memory consumption. And in this approach, we could instead do our anti-aliasing, say closer to over here, right? We can see that's actually where probably really need to do the majority of that. Oh yeah, that's way nicer, smoother. Let's swap that in. Scooch everybody over. Scoot over again. All right. Much nicer. Not nearly as kind of jaggy fussy.